1 week season.
What is going on, OWS fam, props fam, YouTube fam? Welcome to another week of Props Talk. I am your host / guest, JMToWin, here with my buddy Jreasy. Reezy, how you doing, man?
Good, man. Another week on a week two. We had a great week one. It's always great to start on a positive note, right? It's a long season, but getting those units in the bank to start to start the year is exactly what we were looking for. And we put that together. We finished 5-2 of our 7 bets for an ROI of 35%. We felt really good about our projections and our process. The team is just putting in like hours back here, going through the board and selecting the best bets for us to get out to our subscribers. We already feel great about week 2. We have 8 bets out already, but more bets will be coming through the week for anyone looking to jump in on that nice promo we got going on here.
Yeah, so you guys can see the promo. So usually it's $19 for a week pass. It's $9 this week. Code props9. That expires sometime at the end of this week, early next week. I don't know. Just get in there now, but you'll get 7 days, right? So you'll get kind of the tail end of this week's bets and the beginning of next week's bets if you're watching this on Thursday or Friday. And yeah, we were talking before we came on air. It doesn't really truly matter to have a positive week one. What matters is what we do over the course of a season. But there is that psychological component for the users and even for the team of like hitting a 5-2 on week one, and not just hitting a 5-2, but we were down into the Caleb Johnson under rushing yards and Spencer Rattler over pass attempts and some of these that just combing through the books, they don't stand out. But then you really start diving into things. And it, shows that those deeper levels of work and research can really bring the front. I mean, what did Rattler had like 40 pass attempts, right? 46 pass attempts, something like that. And Caleb Johnson had like 1 carry. And so, we kind of get deeper down there when we find those edges. And so, yeah, really cool to see that. And I'm excited about what we have already out there for this week. It's one of the things I love is, right, I'm working on the slate for DFS stuff. Any of you who are just watching this for prop stuff. So 1 week season, we do props, we do DFS, but I kind of jrun the DFS side of things. Reezy runs the prop side of things, and I pitch in with the props. And so kind of coming in, I looked at some of them, like Goff. We've got a Goff bet in there. I guess I won't spoil what that one is. When I looked at it, it was like, oh, really? This one's interesting to me. And then I dove into it. It was like, oh, he hit this 13 out of 17 games last year. And it's just one of those things that, obviously you then got to extrapolate that to this week in this game environment, what you're expecting here. But you kind of start diving into those and you're like, man, these are some sharp bets that are popping up in here, and definitely positive expected value over time. So yeah, man, shout out to you and the team on week one. It was awesome to be able to chip in. I think the things I chipped in probably like broke even, like my unofficial bets in there, but I got some Daniel Jones over 200 passing yards, and yeah. And then Baker kind of flamed out on me there with the passing yards. But yeah, excited to roll forward into this week. And yeah, you got anything else you want to talk about before we dive into? Obviously, we're going to talk through some bets and mostly talk through process and what we're looking at, and kind of hopefully if you're a Props Insider subscriber, you just get the bets given to you, right? But it's great to know the process and how we're looking at things. And if you're not, and you're doing prop betting on your own, these discussions are so valuable in terms of how we're looking at things, how we're thinking about things. You want to hunt down those edges on your own. That's totally cool too. And this can hopefully give you some guidance in what we look for on these types of things. So yeah, Josh, you got anything else before we dive into some of the spots you want to look at this week?
Yeah. Just a quick recap for anybody that's new either this week because we had the promotion or wasn't able to tune in last week. But I am Jreasy and I lead our 1 week season props team. We're going into our 4th season, and as James said, we basically just send you the bets, you bet them. It's easy as that. On this show, you'll get a sneak peek of the things that we look at when we're deciding to take which bets. But this isn't really a pick show. We're going over some of the spots that we have bet earlier in the week. But think of this as a nice, comfortable space to talk through some spots from a betting perspective and get familiar with sports betting as a whole. Jam, if you're ready, I'm ready to just jump into this first game here.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. We got some cool stuff to look at this week. And yeah, you also, I do want to highlight for anybody who's newer to prop betting, a lot of times catching those lines, it doesn't always have to be right away, but catching them when they're dropped into the props channel is where you're going to get the most expected value. And so we will always in the props channel, or at least all of the official bets, they'll let you know what the bet is and what the line is good until. So last week on the show, we talked about the Spencer Rattler bet over 30.5 pass attempts. By the time we were recording, it had already been bet up to 32.5 pass attempts. And so there's that component of when the lines move, or even when the payout moves, like we have to understand where the expected value is when it becomes no longer a positive move on our end. So you'll want to keep an eye on the props channel. You can set alerts on the props channel, and you'll get those bets as they come in. And if you're getting in late this week, there's going to be some of these that are still viable. And then obviously we'll have more coming in throughout this week, and then throughout next week, that'll cover your 7 days. So just wanted to mention that as well. And what do we got, Josh, for this first bet that we want to look at? I think we've got something for tonight's game, right? The Thursday night game for anybody who's watching this early.
Yes, sir. We're going to start with the Thursday nighter. You guys are already here. You might as well just download that DraftKings app and get this bet in there for tonight. But we're going to go with the Washington Commanders visiting the Green Bay Packers. Both teams are 1-1 after they both won by 2 scores last week in week 1. We have a game total here of 48.5, and Green Bay is favored by 3 points. So last year, Green Bay started the season with an injury to Jordan Love, which resulted in Malik Willis getting a few starts and some meaningful game reps last season. With that injury to Love and Malik Willis getting those snaps, it could help explain why they had a minus 8.3 pass rate over expectation in 2024. Because, boy, did those Packers come out throwing the rock here in 2025. Plus 9% pass rate over expectation in the first half of this game versus Detroit, which had them leading 17-3 at halftime and 17-6 after 3 quarters. Last season, Green Bay was dead last in first half PROE. So just a huge change there. So, Jam, I would love to get your thoughts from a coaching perspective, if this change is real, or if you expect Green Bay to kind of go back to the run-heavy ways of 2024.
Yeah, so all of the talk was, all of the talk this offseason was basically like, if Jordan Love can get back to his 2023 form, this is a Super Bowl contender. And there was the caveat thrown in there. You heard it everywhere all the time this offseason. Like, remember, he was hurt the entirety of the 2024 season. It's one of those things that from the outside, these things get downplayed in season. So in season, he's got the injury, he misses a couple games, but they never made a big deal about it throughout the season of like, oh, he's hurt, right? Players aren't going to make excuses. Coaches aren't going to make excuses. But it became clear after the season, he was not himself last year. And so very much so, it looked like they were transforming their offense to account for the limitations of Jordan Love last year. So will he deal with injuries this year? He might, right? He might regress to last year's form at some point this season because it's the NFL, players get injured. But right now he's healthy, and it looks like this is how they want to attack. This is how they want to win games. So yeah, I think I don't think you've mentioned yet what the bet was, but I really liked this one because I thought it was super sharp in terms of blending what we saw last year with what we're expecting to see this year and the signal that we've gotten so far this year. Did you mention what the bet was already and I just missed that?
No, so I'm looking up here on DraftKings. The bet that we took earlier in the week was Josh Jacobs under 18.5 rushing attempts, and we took that at minus 108. So as Jam said earlier, we will send you guys an alert in the Discord. Hey, we have a bet. These are the books that it's best at, that it's playable at, and then we'll give you a minute or two to sign into those books so you're ready to go. You guys can see now that we've already got all the way here to minus 141 here on DraftKings. It is still playable over on FanDuel around like minus 115-ish, which I think is still good, but you guys can just kind of see the big difference in, how quickly and how much these lines can move from minus 108 all the way to minus 141 now.
Yeah, so if you're unfamiliar with betting, which I think at this point, most of you at least understand the mechanics of it, but that's basically you're betting 108, minus 108, you're betting $108 to win 100. At minus 141, you're betting 141 to win 100. So if you just calculate the math on that of how frequently you would have to win that bet, obviously you're dramatically over 50% once you get to that minus 141. And one of the things that I think one of the easiest ways to assess performance and props is that line movement, right? Obviously, props is very binary. You hit or you didn't hit, but there's still sample size noise through a handful of weeks of the season. So when we're consistently seeing this line moving favorably for us, we love to see that. I mean, 18 carries a game. It's funny because we can, when we're playing fantasy or we're playing DFS, we zoom in on like the numbers when a player hits, right? So like 22 carries, 23 carries, like with Josh Jacobs is a bell cow back. And you would think just like off the top of your head, like, oh, well, that should be a standard number of carries. But it's rare for a guy to top 300 carries in a season. 306 carries would be 18 rush attempts per game. So even these bell cow backs don't get there on a weekly basis. And yeah, I really like this early in the season. In this spot and with the way that we would on a short week, which is another thing that you brought up in the Props Insider channel, where what I really love about the approach we take is there's a projections component and then a research component and then also just like a zoom out logic, how this team's going to try to win this game component. And so on a short week, against a defense they should be able to pass on in a game where you should expect points to have to be scored. I really liked this bet. Really liked the thought process behind it too, which I think is one of the cool things to highlight in this show, is how we can think about the thought process behind it and how we can think about, making sure that math makes a lot of sense for us in the spot. Definitely one that I think we would win 10, 11, 12 times in out of a 17 game sample size here in this spot. You got anything else to add on this one, Josh, before we move on to another spot that I also really like this week?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned this. Jacobs did have over 300 carries last year. He finished with 301 carries in 2024, and he was actually 11-6 to the under. So your guess there of 10, 11, 12 times winning is right in line. With those 6 games that he did go over, 2 of those 6 games, he finished with 19 attempts. So he just hooked us. We need 18 or less. He got 19. But in those other 4 games, Jacob had 25 carries, 26 carries, and 32 carries. Those are huge workloads. In those 4 huge workload games, 2 of them were blowouts. And the other 2 ones, they featured Malik Willis as quarterback. So we're looking for a closer game here and no Willis snaps to really feel good about this under. Week 1, Jacobs dominated the RB carries here. He had 19-21 rush attempts. So even a game that he dominated the carries, got almost 100% of the work. He still just got 19. He just beat us there, and that was with a great game script and a big lead. Green Bay defense plays a lot of zone on the other side, so we're expecting Washington to complete a lot of passes. A little tidbit there. We also have a Jaden Daniels over on completions later tonight, and that should keep the clock moving. So a little bit less time of possession there for Green Bay. And then, as you mentioned, this is a Thursday game. To have 19-21 carries the week before and then come out and have, after 4 days, have another 25 plus carries, one of those huge nights that would have beat us last season. We just think this is maybe 1 or 2 carries too high. And, Jacob's still going to be out there. He's going to get the work, but we feel pretty good that he'll be under 18.5 tonight.
Yeah, really like that. And also really like, just want to shout out that from the outside, like when I didn't do any prop betting, it was just like, well, like we're pretty good at this of understanding these things. Obviously sports books are good at this as well, but they limit the amount that you can bet on a prop bet. And so they're fine having it be a little bit of a loss leader. They're fine having some inefficient edges, and you can hit more than 50% of these. And then you realize like, well, because of the way that these bet structures work, you got to hit more than 50% of them, right? Because of the negative 110 or negative 115, betting a little more than the 100 to win 100. And sports books are smart enough to account for that. And so then you really realize, like, as you get in deeper, that you really do have to find these edges. And this is one of those, really like 53 to 55% of the time getting these right just to break even, right? And then you get higher than that, and that's where you're really making the money. And so this is one of those where, again, we can run through what's 300 carries, what did you do last year, what do we expect in this spot, just all the things stack up to say, okay, this is going to hit at that like 60+% rate. And finding those significant edges is, those like the others, you could find 30 or 40 bets that are just sort of right on the edge, but when you can find those ones that are significant edges, that's where we really want to pounce. And so really like this one. So what is this this next one? Because this is another one that we would have won 10 out of 17 times last year. And so what's this next one that we're looking at?
Yeah, we're going to go to Cincinnati. We have the Bengals hosting the Jaguars, total of 48.5, and then 3-point home favorites for Cincinnati. I actually noticed that you had written this up as a game up in the DFS journal that you're doing this year for the Inner Circle members, which is fantastic. It's such a unique way for us as subscribers to get a view into kind of where your head is at throughout the slate instead of just, on Friday, Saturday, kind of there at the end. In there, you kind of talked about how the Jaguars have a disruptive and disciplined defense that could match up well early with the Bengals. To me, this would just put up a little bit too much pressure on Trevor Lawrence to really push the pace against Al Golden and the Green Bay Packers defense. I think they're going to play a lot more man this week than they did last week. Golden played this at like a top rate in college. I think that's what he's comfortable with. And, if he's looking at Trevor Lawrence's man zone splits, I think he's going to be pretty happy. Lawrence has been fine versus zone, but he's really struggled against man in his career. So if you believe that the Jaguars are also going to play Travis Hunter more on D, I think you see him a little bit less on offense. So from the coaching standpoint, if the game plan is to limit the Bengals passing instead of fight fire with fire, I just have a hard time seeing Burrow kind of reach this lofty 281 passing yards that we grabbed earlier in the week. It's now sitting around 275-ish. So we'll see 276 here. And I think that's still good. But I'm kind of wondering what your thoughts are here on Trevor Lawrence, and if the Jaguars have the ability to really push Cincinnati into one of these back and forth games that Burrow really needs to get these high yardage totals.
Yeah, we talk about the Packers and Packers fans hoping that Jordan Love finds his 2023 form. It was the second half of 2022 that Trevor Lawrence looked like the guy that he was drafted to be. That's a very small portion of his career, right? So I believe it was 2021 was his rookie year, was the Urban Meyer year. And then Doug Peterson came in and it was like, okay, well, it's taken him a little while to get adjusted. And that back half of the year, those last 7, 8, 9 games, and plus the playoffs, he caught fire. And he looked like the guy that everybody had expected him since high school to be. And then 2023, it wasn't that. 2024, it wasn't that. And so there's a lot of expectation. I explored this last week, but Brian Thomas Jr. and Trevor Lawrence never really synced up last year. Brian Thomas Jr. had this tremendous rookie season, but what people forget, it was his big fantasy outputs were the last 6 games of the season. And who was starting at quarterback? Mac Jones was starting at quarterback in those games. It was 6 of Brian Thomas Jr.'s 8 best games. In fact, 3 of his 4 best games, his 2 best games, all came with Mac Jones. And so that's not to say these are young players. Things change. These players are always working. Everything's dynamic in the NFL. Liam Cohen's a great coach. Brian Thomas Jr. is an incredible wide receiver. He's open all the time. Trevor Lawrence has the tools. So this could get going, but we're actually putting a lot. There's 2 parts to this. One, the Bengals are a reactive offense. Actually, and a 1B to that is early in the season, the Bengals run very basic West Coast concepts, and then they sort of develop on top of that throughout the season, which is part of the reason why we see these slow starts for them. Anthony Campanelli is a very smart defensive coordinator with the Jags, understands this West Coast system, and is going to know what to try to take away in that regard. And then on top of that, the Bengals are a team that really, they wait until the opponent starts scoring points in order for them to get aggressive in response. So you look at all these games last year, Joe Burrow had this monster year, this MVP style season. You mentioned that he basically had the nut run out last year. He was still under this in 10 out of 17 games, which would make this a winning bet over time. And then you add to that it's early in the season. You add to that you really need the Jags pushing this on the scoreboard. And that requires Trevor Lawrence to play in a way that he hasn't in the past. So, yeah, the lower this number comes, the more concerned I get from an emotional standpoint, because you're like, ooh, it's Joe Burrow. And obviously there's also just team names that stick out to us. We look at Jags and we're like, they're not very good, right? Their defense isn't that good. They're decent, right? They're decent on the back end. They've got a tremendous pass rush. And, between put all that together, and they're probably going to be an average to above average defense this season. And so you can kind of look at it and be like, yeah, but what if Trevor Lawrence has a big game? And what if the Bengals respond? And Joe Burrow can certainly do this. But if we could run out this slate and this game 100 times, this scenario, this is a winning bet, right? This is something that's going to hit 60% of the time or more. And so, this is one of those. Also, I want to shout out, curious actually your thoughts on this, but people are biased to the over because it feels better on a Sunday emotionally to be sitting there and hoping for that one big play. There was one bet that I almost tossed in as an unofficial bet in the channel, and it was Derrick Henry under rushing yards. And then my thought was, man, but it just takes that one run, And so you're sitting there all day on Sunday sweating this bet or sweating your call on this bet, and you're like, man, I hope he doesn't have he's 60 yards under, but that one run that takes him over. And so it's much more enjoyable to be sitting there down on a bet and not quite winning it yet, but you're like, ooh, but that one play, right? And then when that one play hits in the second quarter or third quarter, the bet's resolved. You've won, as opposed to you're waiting all 60 minutes to be like, all right, stay under. And so I do think that there's a heavy bias toward the over on bets like this, which I think gives us a nice little edge when we're able to find these unders that are plus EV. Do you have any thoughts on that bias? Because I know that we're really in Props Insider, I would almost say we have a heavy bias to the unders. I see unders in there. I notice a lot more often than I see overs. Not that I've tallied it all up, but just from observationally, that's what it feels like to me. Curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean the public loves overs, right? Who wants to put their hard-earned money on a prop bet and then watch the game and spend 3 hours watching the game to hope things don't happen? Right? People want to see things happen. They want to see these big plays, and that leads them to betting overs. It used to be a lot bigger of an edge back in the day, hitting unders, but books have got a lot smarter. They've definitely lowered the lines. They're inviting overs a lot more than they have before, which just means that we have to work a little bit harder to find the unders. But we love unders. If we had a choice between an over and an under, we would take an under every day. And we just try to find the things that are available on the board at all times. But we do as sports bettors have a bias to the over when we're watching. but the people that are doing this for real, especially in the NFL, they've grown, and that secret's kind of out. So these numbers do get hit down, but it is a bias, and people see. Last year Burrow threw for 5,000 yards. He had this perfect storm, and as you mentioned, he was still 10-7 to the under. In those 7 games where he did go over, the game totals were 47, 54, 61, 69, 71, 79, and 82. Right, so we're talking about some huge point total games here for him to go over. 5 of those 7 games were Bengals losses. I feel like the Bengals are the better team here, probably on the good side for a win. Where the other 2 games were games where Burrow averaged 180 yards just in the fourth quarter and overtime alone. So we have 5 of those games that Bengals lost. The other 2 were really close in the fourth and overtime, and Bengal put Joe let Joe cook. He put into high gear, averaged 180 yards here in that last quarter, and I just don't see that kind of as the game flow here.
Yeah, and also one of the things I want to shout here is there is a component, if you're watching this, obviously our channel is primarily DFS and some fantasy, and then now we've added the props show here. So a lot of you watching this probably are DFS players, and there's this component. I always say this of like if you're building 150 rosters and you put. So I used this example last week. Like if you put Travion Henderson on one roster, you might only have him on 1 out of 150. So in 149 rosters, you're telling a story of Travion Henderson not being a guy that you had to have in order to win that slate. But on that one roster, you're telling a story of him being the guy that you have in order to win that slate. And so I think that people can get into this mindset of like all or nothing, right? And so you bet the under on Burrow, and then you're like, okay, so I'm not playing him in DFS this weekend. But realistically, there is a scenario in which this plays out to the upside. So then you ask, how does this play out to the upside? If I'm losing this prop bet over here with this money, how am I losing it? I'm probably losing it in a game where, and what's great about this situation is, that Burrow doesn't hit alone. Last year, Burrow hit for like a really strong DFS game 7 times, and Jamar Chase hit in 6 of those games, right? So that Chase is almost certainly going to be there. All but one of those were double stack weeks where you would have wanted to have had 2 guys. That's going to be probably T. Higgins, and if it's not him, it's going to be Chase Brown. So then you get 3 spots on your roster correct, and that they have to be pushed by the Jags. So you have to say, okay, either Travis Etienne or Brian Thomas Jr., more than likely one of those 2 guys, is also putting up a big game in order to force this game environment upward. So all of a sudden, you've got 4 spots on a roster covered that can go for 5x the combined salaries and be the players that you had to have. So you've got this barbell where it's like, yeah, I've got $100 on this under on Joe Burrow over here, but maybe I've also got $50 on what happens if I lose that bet, and is there a chance that this $50 could win me 3,000 or 4,000 over here in DFS? So yeah, the math says take the under, and then we also recognize that things can play to the over. So instead of having that complete either or black and white mentality, we can say, how do I hedge off of this? Well, how do I lose this bet? Well, if I lose this bet, it's probably in such a way that there's money to be made over here in an asymmetric manner where the payout is even higher. And so, we can kind of balance what we're doing here with stuff like that. And so, wanted to shout that out, especially on this particular spot, because rather than taking firm stances, we should let the math play in our favor. And in DFS, that might be playing Burrow. And on the prop side, that's betting the under on Burrow. And that's counterintuitive to a lot of people, but that's really how we position ourselves over time to just make as much as we can in these areas. Anything else you have to add on this spot before we move on to our third kind of core spot that we wanted to talk about this week?
No, I'm all good there, but just to kind of echo that, DFS and sports betting are 2 different games with 2 different equations, and we just want to make sure that we're not using the wrong equation for the wrong game, and just make sure that we do kind of have our head in 2 different spots when we are a DFS player and a sports bettor.
Yeah, I like the way you put that. All right, so this third game. So I got this in here. I was a little bit surprised to see this in the show because, this one feels like we're extrapolating a little bit and we're making some calculations based on knowledge that we have as opposed to what we're able to see on paper because it's a new situation. It's a guy coming off of injury. But this was a bet that I brought up, that I brought to the props channel, I think this morning or last night. And it's one that I like. And so I'll let you lead this one off with kind of your thoughts and discussion on this.
Yeah, we're going to New England versus the Miami Dolphins, 2 teams that came out flat and picked up week 1 losses. They're going to be hungry. The Dolphins really got smashed by Daniel Jones and the Colts. I think we can really toss out a lot of week 1 for the Dolphins, they were just embarrassed, right? They gave up 30 unanswered points to start the game. They scored late on a touchdown from Tua to Achane, but it was 30-0. The game was over. Just some garbage time there for them. But we can look at how Indy attacked their defense. Indy completed 13 of 17 targets to Michael Pittman and Tyler Warren, guys that we kind of look at as like intermediate targets for the Colts. I think we could transfer that to the Patriots with Diggs and their tight ends. In week one, Kayshon Boutte took more of the deep stuff, and he did really well. He went 6 for 103, I think, definitely over 100, and that came with an average depth of target of 17.3 yards. So he was running a lot of the deep stuff, ran almost exclusively from the outside. I saw that you mentioned Diggs throughout Discord this week. Do you think that there's room for his role to kind of increase here in week 2?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's room for his role to increase. And more than that, I think that we see these sometimes where it's like a player's snap share isn't super high, but their target share when they're on the field is high. And I think that tells a totally different story than just how many targets did they get compared to how many pass attempts were there. That shows a level of intent when a guy is on the field and he's getting target, which is one of the things we saw with Diggs last week.
Yeah, we saw that Diggs ran the third most routes of the receivers. So Douglas was and Boutte was ahead of him. So I think that there's some room to grow there. You tossed this out at over 40.5, I think. And as we can see here, we're already up to 44. I think that's still good. I think you could take the 44. As I said, this really isn't as much of a projection bet as it is, just knowing that we have a stud in Diggs here. Coming off an ACL injury, getting a little bit healthier more week after week, and getting a little bit more trust of his quarterback. And I definitely think that, this is one of the bets that you want to get on early. We talked about ball knowing, right? And ball knowing in football and NFL is way more important to the sports betting game than NBA, we could say. NBA, we use projections a lot, and we make sure our projections are as tight as we can. NFL, we're a little bit more liberal here. We want to be directionally sound in our projections, but projections can't tell you exactly what's going to happen on that day today. They take into effect previous games and previous experiences, and it's just so much more of a chess match here in the NFL versus the NBA. So we got it out there at 40.5. It's up to 44. So the people agree with you, JM.
Yeah, and you made some really good points there about one of my edges in DFS has always been just recognizing that every game is a unique matchup, and there are two coaching staffs that are strategizing early in the week on how do we win this specific game against this specific opponent. And we have these small sample sizes of, you're 5-6 games into the season, you're a month and a half into the season, and it feels like so much of the season has gone by, but you really just have 6 games worth of sample sizes. So even analytics sites and companies that try to boil things down to treating each individual play as its own individual sample in order to increase the sample size, it still doesn't give us what we really need, because it's still within the context of each individual game. And there's so much that goes on between the lines in terms of game flow and how the game change, how the play calling changes based on that. And even just like the actual physicality of one team versus another team and what you're trying to do in those games. So yeah, one of the things that I liked here are a few things that I liked here. One is, obviously the Patriots are going to want to be more balanced this week, right? So we don't expect 46 pass attempts from Drake May, but we do understand that the Dolphins are fundamentally attackable in the secondary. And especially if you're attackable in the secondary like that, well, what are you going to do? You're going to say, well, we're going to make sure we don't get beat. So that leaves that intermediate area of the field more open. And then on top of that, Josh McDaniels, there have been former Patriots players who have talked about how Josh McDaniels, more than most other coaches, has a really good feel for understanding what a wide receiver needs, insofar as a wide receiver would love to get catches early. They would love to touch the ball early in order to get in that rhythm, get their head in the game, get hit, and feel like they're part of things, right? And Josh McDaniels does a good job understanding that and saying, okay, this guy hasn't been involved yet, let's get him a target. This guy hasn't been involved yet, let's get him a target. And so a guy like Stephon Diggs that they obviously want to have as a kind of core part of this offense that, they started 0-1. They were still kind of a sexy pick to be a playoff contender this year, right? They still have the talent on this team to make the talent and the coaching staff on this team to make a push throughout the season and be a competitive team throughout the season. And so Diggs would be a big part of that. And so, I like this one as a place where you just say, look, we're going to get him involved. We're going to get him targets. Do I think he gets 60, 70 yards? I think that would be a stretch, right? It's going to happen sometimes in the sample size, but that's not likely. But when I saw 40.5, it was just like, that seems really low for what we know about this team, what we know about this matchup, and also just the fact that the Dolphins match up well against the Patriots defense as well, and should be able to have a bounce back week here, unless the vibes are just so low in Miami that we're losing Mike McDaniel after this week, which is a possibility. But I would expect the Dolphins to do better here, and that also helps this bet, because then that just forces the Patriots to have to stay a little bit aggressive in that intermediate area of the field. So yeah, fun to see that one moving as well. Looks like we've got a lot of actually all three of these that we've hit on today. The line or the money line has moved in our favor. So yeah, Diggs up to 44.5. We got it at 40.5 in the Props Insider channel. You got anything else to add on that one before we move over to these alt bets that we want to hit?
No, I'm ready to get to the alts. I took the air ball last week. I went with the guys that you're supposed to go with alts at. Maybe they get no catches, maybe they get a million. But I took the air ball last week with Darius Slayton. But for in my defense here, Darius Slayton did run a route on 93% of the dropbacks. But he just finished with one target. This week I'm going to go with a guy that we did mention last week as a straight bet with Joe Flacco after another classic Joe Flacco game with the Browns. He went 31 for 45 for 290 yards, blew past the straight prop somewhere in the low 230s, and even got us a couple rungs on the passing ladder. I think we had it all the way up to 300. We got the 290 right on the dot for us. So we love Joe. This week I'm going to go Joe at 280. At 194, 290 at 244, and 300 here at 315. And I'm going to put 0.1 units on both of those. So if your unit's $100, maybe just $10 on each one of these. We have the upside here. They're nearly 12-point underdogs on the road against the Ravens. Joe's actually averaged, in these 7 games as a Cleveland Brown, or last 7 games at least, 316 passing yards. And the Ravens just gave up nearly 400 passing yards to the Bills in prime time. Do you still see this as a spot to continue after we hit it last week, or until we're proven otherwise? Or do you have any other alt spots that you're looking at this week?
Yeah, I want to hit on this first, and then I'll throw mine out there. And real quickly, so if you're unfamiliar with prop betting or newer to this, these alt lines, as Jreasy mentioned, right, you get like the plus 314, right? So that means you're betting $100 to win 314, or $10 to win $31.40. And so you get these higher payouts. So when we have these players who, their bet might fall on either side of the number 50% of the time, but these types of players that when it falls on the positive side of the number, it falls way like to the upside, right? And so we can bet these ladders where we just take the plus money higher and higher and higher and just say, hey, if this guy ends up throwing for 315 yards, like we're catching money on each step along each rung along the ladder. If he doesn't get all the way up there, we're hitting some of these rungs along the ladder and making some profit. And I really like Joe Flacco as one of these, because again, this is what we talked about last week on this show. They did not bring him in to be the starter to hide him. And realistically, there's been a lot of talk this week about, the Bengals slow start, and they played guys in preseason and they still look slow and all. And like, man, Myles Garrett was wrecking that game, right? And I was actually thinking about this on Sunday night. It's so easy to quantify the impact that a cornerback has, because if you have a Darrelle Revis where you can put him on the other team's best wide receiver and you can say, all right, we're going to play 10-on-10 football, and you don't have, you're a Canadian guy, you got 12-on-12 football. Well, if you got Darrelle Revis, you've got 10-on-10 football, right? And the other team's missing their best wide receiver. Well, we can easily quantify that edge as fans of like, oh yeah, you can take away their best weapon, play 10-on-10. There's a reason why the top pass rushers are paid more than any player in football besides the top quarterbacks, right? And it's harder to quantify it, but you get most games, let's say on average 10 drives in a game. If 4 drives get wrecked, which doesn't mean throughout the drive this player's doing, it just means 1 second and 7 that they turn into a 3rd and 15. Those are really hard to convert. 1 3rd and 6 that they wreck the play and make 4th down, right? Myles Garrett can do that 5, 6, 7 times a game, right? And so I think that's one of the things that's gone overlooked is this is still like, if you're in that locker room, you're still looking at this as like, we're a team that has a chance, right? And so part of their chance is Joe Flacco going out there and throwing the ball, and he's going to be aggressive. And really, like these guys, they get older. Like one of the big issues, Drew Brees, Matt Ryan, Aaron Rodgers, one of the things they face is under pressure, they start to get a little bit more like, all right, let me take the ball, let me turn my body, right, so I don't take too big of a hit. Not Flacco, man. Like Flacco is going to get hit in the face. He's going to throw the ball downfield. He's going to do it over and over again. He's going to be too aggressive, and we love that for these ladder bets. So yeah, really like that one. And then mine is, speaking of these guys who, right, when they go over, they can go way over. Mine is Nico Collins, and so I put the numbers in there earlier. I think it was like 4 out of, I don't have them off the top of my head, but I think it was like 4 out of 11 games. Look how much more prepared you are, Josh, than I am. You got your numbers written down next to you. Yeah, it's something like 4 of 11 games last year that he went like 117 plus yards, right? And so we know that Nico is used downfield. We know that he's a big play merchant. And so what we like about Nico is this over under is 75.5, which is, that's a high number. But then when we say, okay, but if he hits that, most of the time in games, AJ Brown's the same way. Most of the time in games where Nico's hitting that, he's not going for 79 or 81 and just barely getting us that mark. He's hitting that because it's a game where they're able to hit him on some downfield shots. And if they're able to hit him on downfield shots, they're probably going to be able to hit him on more than one, right? And so that's where we see Nico end up with these. First time I ever bet a ladder was, or first time I ever took one of these alt lines, as I mentioned last week, was an AJ Brown game where it was like, oh, like if he goes over, he's going way over, and so. Same thought process with Nico. It's one of these spots where you can ladder that up and just add some extra expected value, because if he's going over, there's a chance that he's going way over, and you can take full advantage of that.
Yeah, it's 7 times over 76 yards. As you said, is over under 75.5. But of those 7 times, 4 times over 117. So let's ladder that one up. It's funny that you bring up AJ Brown. AJ Brown is a lot like Nico Collins. AJ Brown's played 31 games for the Eagles. In 12 of the 31 games, he's over 100 yards, right? So when you go to 110 yards, he's 10 of the 31 games, he's over 110. So we can get AJ Brown, just as another example here, at 100. Let me see if I can get it up here quick. But if we can get it 12 over 100 yards and over 110 yards, we get that at 315 and plus 340. So we're actually really close to having that actually as 12 of 31 games over 110 yards, because 2 games he finished at 109. So AJ Brown has a great stat here where of the 31 games, 8 games were under 50 yards, 7 games between 50 and 80. And this is a guy that we see routinely lined in the high 60s and the low 70s, and only 7 of 31 games as the Eagle has he finished anywhere close to that number, right? Between 50 and 80 yards. He's very boom or bust. We should never be taking AJ Brown or Nico Collins straight bet. We should always be trying to alt these guys up that are very boom and bust. We'll find out very early if the Chiefs are going to try to contain Hurts or if they're going to let AJ Brown kind of eat on the outside there. AJ Brown would be another one. Ray with Nico Collins there is a guy that could really take the top off a defense when given a chance, especially if they get man coverage. Those guys both just eat versus man.
Yeah, really like that shout and that example, because again, like you said, he's almost never at this line, and we look for games like that in DFS too, where the over/under is the same as a different over/under, but it's a different type, right? It could go way to the upside or way to the downside, and we prefer that in a situation like DFS where we're looking for asymmetric upside. In props, it's fine taking these guys who are going to hit barely over or barely under, but 60% of the time, and we're getting on the right side of that bet. But when we find these guys like Nico or AJ Brown, where it's like, if they're going over, they're probably going way over. There's an edge in how we can play that as well and try to get those asymmetric payouts. And it'll hit a little bit less often, but if we could play out that slate over and over again, we would make money over time on those. Josh, you got anything else before we get out of here?
Maybe just how to really price these alt lines. So we can see here, we have 100 yards for AJ Brown at 313. So that's like an implied hit rate of around like 24-25%. And then we can go 12 out of 31, how many times, this actual hit rate is, and that's 39%. So we're paying for a 24-25% implied hit rate, and it has an actual 39. Again, we talked about this earlier, not every game's created equal, but this is against the Chiefs. They do play a little bit of man. We could take that to the 440 here, 441 now. That's like a 20% implied hit rate, and we're getting that 32% actual hit rate. As I said, we had that 109 twice. So, we're basically 12 out of 31. That would be 39%. And we're only paying 20% on this implied hit rate. So you do need to do some math. There's tons of odds converters out there. Just type in odd converter into Google and you'll be able to, your bet style of choice, whether it's decimal or fraction or American or anything like this, you'll be able to convert that to figure out what you need these bets to hit at an actual rate to BEV.
Yeah, and on top of that, if you are a Props Insider, whether you're on the week pass or you picked up the full season, there's the Props Insider chat where people are extremely helpful and great community in there. So you can always hop in there, pick people's brains, kind of learn more about what you're doing, how to price these things. And yeah, find those bets. You know, we all like excitement, right? So find those ones that are going to hit a little bit less often, but we're going to make money over time on them because when they hit big, and we can take advantage of that as well. Man, Josh, fun to be doing this show weekly. Really excited for what's ahead here, and really cool. Last week, your first not live, but next week actually we are going to be live. Actually,
Yes, sir.
we're going to be 6 p.m. Eastern. We're going to start running this out live on YouTube, and obviously you'll still be able to watch it afterwards. But yeah, your first podcast last week, as I told you, and Aaron and I both told you, like we knew you do great on podcasts because you're just great at talking, and so yeah, been fun to be doing this with you, and looking forward to the rest of the season. For any of you who are watching this and are not Props Insider members, again, remember code PROPS9 gets you $9 week pass. Normally that's 19, so that's more than 50% off. And you can get 7 days, so you'll get, pick this up on Thursday or Friday. You'll get the rest of this week's bets, and whatever in there is still viable for this week that's already been in there. And then you'll get next week, the first part of next week's bets as well. And then yeah, there's also full season passes, $149 if you want to just hop in on the full and just be part of this season and make some extra money here on the side. We'll do all the research for you and drop the bets in there. And if you're not in Props Insider, you don't plan to join, thanks for hanging out with us and hopefully learning some cool stuff and how we think through all this. And yeah, with that, we will see you back here next week live at 6 p.m. Eastern. And we will see you in those props streets on Sunday.
Good luck, guys.